This video is sponsored by my OnlyFans, where I do my meaningful sex educational content, fitness, health, nutrition, relationship advice, and more. Hi guys, and welcome to Geri Reviews and to this third part of the analysis of Luetin's video about the Emperor, the the last one that gets into the most interesting parts. And it is time to, well, try to finish it, although it's rather late, but it's going to be the most interesting of all parts. So hey guys, hi to everybody in the chat. We are continuing from where we left off. Basically, Luetin was telling us about this short story that is telling, that is telling, yeah, it is very telling actually, about the Primarchs and what are they. And not a lot of people read that. I had the pleasure to listen to the audio version thanks to one of my Primarchs, dear Clayton, who found it, so thank you very much, dear Clayton. It is only like 25 minutes, but basically, well, it's amazing. I might do a separate video on it, but he mentions it here, and I don't know, I mean, it's a huge proof that the Primarchs are just tools, guys. That's the gist of it. Now, let's continue and see what we can analyze from what Luetin is taking as an information about our lovely Emperor. And
Sybil answers, can it be true? And Malcador exclaims how his failure was in underestimating the true enemy, that the ruinous powers emboldened their champions, and the war began before they were ready. He talks about how every toll of the bell gives pause to question, was it a death they intended, or another innocent soul they may have saved, and that this is his burden to bear, and that he does so that the Emperor may concentrate on the final battle to come. In his final words, Malcador tells her to fall, and he will catch you. This I swear, give yourself to him, of course meaning the Emperor. As the dawn comes, Sybil lies dead. Malcador contemplates his further thoughts through a bitter and frustrated tone. He considers how the Emperor promised it wouldn't be like this. But most critically he says, I lie to them to spare their sorrow, even as I envy their mortality. And
oh, thank you, dear Clayton. And of course, hi Matty, as well to you. I mean, thank you, dear Ivy, yes, but thank you also, dear Clayton, for the help. Yeah, so he continues with the story now. He was telling all of this about the Primarchs to a woman that was dying, so yeah, for context.
It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. Swallowing his grief and loneliness, he lays her hands on her in the sign of the Aquila.
Wow, dear Clayton, that is amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you for being you too. That's a huge help. Thank you, dear Clayton. Awesome.
Now this short is a difficult one. It's clearly intended to be. Many people dismiss Malcador's revelations, as I noted earlier, but it is the nature of 40k. Information and details are fractured, and even without this revelation, you can largely piece together what is happening. The real difficulty comes in knowing what the overall plan would be precisely. The one thing I feel sure of is that the Emperor wanted to or needed the heresy to happen.
Yes, okay, so one note here to be made is that before I ever knew that this story existed, I did say that the Primarchs looks like the Primarchs are more tools than his sons. And I'm not biased or having some kind of a romantic vision of the Emperor and how he sees the Primarchs. I'm just trying to be objective, so I'm not allowing my feelings towards anything to affect my judgment here. So I did say, by everything that we know so far, the Primarchs look like they're more of a tools than they're his sons. They only become his sons when he is interacting directly with them and he wants something out of them, but in the rest of how he is behaving in the rest of the time, the picture is totally different. So what this short story showed was exactly confirming what I've been thinking. It seems like all the creators that ever brought their input into Warhammer, they obviously led to some conclusions. I mean, they want to establish how the dynamic between different characters is, and that has to be there. There's a lot of things that are behind the scenes that they have to come up with and decide what they will be actually leaving on the pages and what not. So that means that all of the writers know a lot more than we do, and they just selectively write specific parts of the story spread out through all of those novels and short stories, and it's all like pieces of the puzzle. And it's a clever thing to put something like that in a short story if you think about it, because then not everybody are going to read it, but it's there and it does confirm how actually things stand. So that is awesome. Okay, now continuing with the video, and once again, dear Effie and dear Clayton, thank you very much.
It's pretty clear, as Malcador notes, that the Primarchs have all been positioned to agitate and create jealous doubts between them. You see this throughout the heresy, where the Emperor hardly is acting like a father figure, and there's many times where you just think, what the hell, why didn't he just appease and calm down that situation? Instead, he allows these frustrations and jealousies to fester under the surface. But as Malcador notes, perhaps the timing of their plan was off, and this threw things into disarray. Also, it seems plausible that individuals like Magnus were not meant to turn to the Dark Gods, as we believe Magnus was meant to be, if not the power, then the controller of the Golden Throne in whatever role that was going to ultimately play. Again, remembering that before the end of the heresy, the Emperor was able to leave the throne for periods of time. This didn't cause disaster or stop the Astronomicon from working. Again, because the Emperor, remember, he was so powerful that he can control these things at a distance. It's only after the heresy that the Emperor is weakened, and so then must remain on the Golden Throne, aided by continual Psychus sacrifice. Now, a small tangent about that. In the heresy, we see how Magnus is baited with visions of himself being the corpse on the throne by the dark powers to attempt to turn him. Of course, he resists this for the most part, and we know this is another attempt at creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, which kind of is what happens. Although again, just as with the temptation of Horus, how accurate was this vision of the future? Was it the future or just one possible future? And then, like I said, of course, ultimately it does become another self-fulfilling prophecy because of Magnus and another causal loop. This is what makes the end period of the heresy and the Emperor's ultimate goals to us so difficult, because many of the things he planned for appeared to be with a different outcome in mind entirely, but then also not things that he really voiced. A very obvious line of thinking that many people, including me, have considered is, could the Emperor's positioning on the Golden Throne be intentional? Is he trying to achieve ascension to godhood via the now galactic religion of the Imperium? Was this his goal all along?
Yeah, that is a good question. But to recap real quick, so definitely the Primarchs were meant to turn on each other. And the other things are just a blur, and we're not sure which ones and whether or not Magnus was supposed to turn and so on. Because also from that short story, it becomes clear that definitely things went a bit wrong, or a lot, and happened a bit earlier than the Emperor and Malcador himself thought. So something went wrong along the way, and whatever future Magnus saw also, you can say it was a possible one. So yeah. Oh, thanks dear Clayton once again. Thank you.
Long. This is, like I say, not a new idea by any means, but it's difficult to see why that would be necessary, given that essentially the Emperor was already a god by any definition up until his battle with Horus, and even in the aftermath for that matter. There's just too much we don't know. So we cannot say what Malcador is lying about also in reference to the First Lord, because we do not know exactly what the Emperor promised Malcador. Also where he says, I lie to spare them their sorrow. What is he referencing here? Saying them could mean a lot of things, but it's most likely mortal humans or maybe Primarchs. I think it's fair to assume that as he's just spoken to this loyal astropath, he is more likely speaking about having to lie to those close members of the Imperial service about how things are going in the heresy or the plan overall. But this also does not necessarily mean that what he is saying, generally speaking, is a lie. There's always a foundation of truth to most lies anyway, after all. But here's the thing, if you were to just take these things at their most simplistic face value, the whole thing makes no sense. We're meant to believe that Malcador told her this grand tale about how the Emperor and Malcador basically wanted to bring down the Astartes because this was their whole plan, and she's meant to be comforted by this horrifying revelation? Why even bother? He could have just said, don't worry, Sybil, this is all part of our plan. We will all surely emerge victorious. But no, he tells her this was part of our plan, but now it's all gone tits up. That's a strange way to reassure somebody on their deathbed. It's hardly textbook where you lie and tell them everything's going to be fine and both of you nod understanding it's a lie. The whole point of this exchange is that he gives her a harsh truth. That yes, she can feel reassured that this was part of a plan Malcador and the Emperor forged, but also that it's not going exactly as planned. He's reassuring her by giving her actual truth. The lie is that the Emperor will not be there to catch her. Only darkness and the nightmare of the warp await. And it is this which is what is breaking Malcador's heart. Now I'll play devil's advocate and say, well okay, what if this whole thing was just a lie and the only reason he told her all of this was to save her from the far worse truth that the Emperor and Malcador do not have a grand saving vision for humanity at all, and that their best laid plans lay in ruin now. Everything's gone catastrophically wrong, and at this point they're completely winging it and hoping that they haven't inadvertently caused the doom of all humanity to total extinction and eternal misery in a version of hell.
Yep.
Now I'm not going to lie, that's actually a possibility. But personally, I just don't see it. It's too bleak even by 40k standards, and it's also not really what the story of 40k and the Emperor is about. It also somewhat sets up the Emperor as being an incompetent, bumbling fool. Not to mention, it would also give this short the equivalent of an "it was all a dream" ending. It would be like those Star Trek episodes where everybody dies, and at the end they're like, haha, not really. I just think the premise of Malcador laying out all this stuff, and then saying, actually, it was all a lie, however you want to cut it, it just doesn't work for me. The much more telling revelation is when Malcador says, "You promised me it wouldn't be like this," in reference of course to himself and the Emperor. I think if anything, this is what helps the most to confirm what he just revealed, because again, otherwise it doesn't make any sense that the Emperor and Malcador had planned things with a grandiose scheme, but that the Emperor perhaps promised things wouldn't be as catastrophic as they ended up being. That fits perfectly. Why would he say that to himself if that wasn't the case? It wouldn't make any sense. Also, when Malcador tells Sybil that the war began before we were ready. As I noted earlier, I believe this to be a reference to the Chaos Gods pressuring them, perhaps having realised just what the Emperor was up to, or just part of some larger timeline and wanting to close things down now as quickly as possible. And that fits within, generally speaking, the wider picture of what we know. And beyond this, of course, in the wider sense, there remain many other heavy questions about figures like the King in Yellow, now believed to be Constantine Valdor. We know this via the Eisenhorn, Raven Bequin novels. This is of course talking about the Cognate, and we learned that the King seeks to obtain the true name of the Emperor in order to obtain power over him. Precisely why and for what reason is unknown. We also know he has an army of winged space marines, possibly even Custodes like in Stasis, but again, this is strange considering how Custodes are essentially genetically engineered to be loyal to the Emperor. But if it were possible for Valdor and his circle of the Eight able to overcome this, it's believable that they could be rightly outraged by the Emperor's actions.
Okay, note to self, and also dear Clayton, if you like to send me this on Discord. Research, that's the note. Constantine Valdor and him apparently trying to find the true name of the Emperor so he can have power over him. Like, that's the first time I ever heard about this. That's extremely interesting. Oh, Jesus, the mic, sorry. That's extremely interesting. I have to research that, so yeah. It just blows my mind. Yeah, how is a Custodian not loyal to the Emperor? Jesus.
And his plans if they were able to kind of get their heads straight, as it were. There of course exist possibilities that they retain information which also give greater context to their actions, and that's certainly a heavy topic for another day, and likely when there's also more information to go on, because right now sparse is an understatement. The point is, there is a lot that supports Malcador's explanations to Sybil. I believe that most of what Malcador said here is the truth, or at least from a certain point of view.
Okay,
Because, like I say,
I just thought that he said all of that to her because, yeah, first she's dying, second, he doesn't have anyone to vent to, he doesn't have anyone that he could like go and confide in. He has the Emperor, he's like his best friend and everything else, so he just went at it and told her everything. He's also a bit egotistic in a way. Egocentric, yeah, so he was like, I'm just gonna tell her that, oh, she's a bit stressed out and she's dying, I'm just gonna tell her that I have to vent to someone. So yeah, I do think that it was just out of build-up annoyance in him, and to a point he's just, you know, tired from everything, from his responsibility to the Emperor, to the Imperium. So he decided to just vent. He didn't think much of it. He pretended that he had compassion towards this woman, but in the beginning of this short story, actually, it's obvious that he doesn't. He's a bit cold. So since I actually listened to the story, I can tell you from my perspective that he seems like Malcador did this because he just wanted to vent and he didn't care how she's gonna feel about it. So yeah, that's what happened. So I am absolutely believing his words, and that is indeed true. And yeah, I mean, I don't think that the Emperor is like an idiot because that actually happened. I think that it's true what we talked about last time, that the Emperor showed in the past that the future is shifting and he can take certain steps to get there, but the fact that he sees possible future doesn't mean that he sees the steps that he has to take to get there. He has to kind of guess that along the way, and when he can't, he makes mistakes, and that's how things happened earlier, and some unforeseen factors get to play their role, and that's it. So that doesn't mean that he's an idiot. It means that he's very, very ambitious and he wants to do what he wants to do. I mean, to create his vision, but that doesn't mean that he's gonna succeed. His ego is in the way as well, so if he listens to his ego, he's also going to make mistakes. Yeah, I mean, lack of wisdom is prevalent in Warhammer, so there's that. So once again, conclusion, I do believe Malcador.
The alternative makes no sense. Then at the end also, when he says, I lied to spare them their sorrow, even as I envy their mortality, Malcador's heart breaks for the fact that any who die are not being saved by the Emperor, but they're falling into the horror of the warp. That is what he laments. It's why he also speaks about the death of innocence being his burden to bear. And that is why he lies to her, and he tells her the Emperor will catch her to spare her the sorrow of knowing she, and importantly, all others who are dying, are about to be sent straight to hell. Lastly, Malcador's sorrow that's breaking his heart, likely because he truly believed in the Emperor and that they were going to be able to save the majority of humanity from a dark fate, to secure humanity in the webway and thereby guide them into a new age of existence. But for Malcador, the writing is now on the wall. It's clear this will not come to pass, hence him saying it wasn't supposed to be like this.
Yeah, and thanks, heretic. I'm gonna research that custody thing, because it's very interesting.
So to state the exceedingly obvious, when considering the Emperor of Man, we must assume he is playing the long game, perhaps the longest game, for he has walked across millennia and the true scope of his vision remains unknowable in terms of how he perceives time itself. I sometimes heretically question if the Emperor, not unlike demons, has something of the ability to see time from the eternalist viewpoint, whereby he sees past, present and future together, and he sometimes gets visions of the future, enabling him to adjust his plans, but the certainty of such future events, as we've discussed, may not excuse difficulties faced in the present, which, to be quite honest, somewhat conflicts with that concept of time. But perhaps it's somewhere within that view, or perhaps it's somewhere where there are future possibilities. We've been shown glimpses of the past that suggest it was as far back as the ancient time on Earth that he decided his true path, waiting for an ideal time until a situation presented itself. He would wait, passing through human history, observing, learning, and undoubtedly manipulating. I think the most disturbing and perhaps most telling aspect is when the Emperor chose to emerge as a force for humanity. Not during the Golden Age prior to the cybernetic revolt, he appears after this, when humanity is at its weakest. Not when it was necessary, but when he needed it. That being when humanity can put up arguably the least resistance to his plans, and when the necessary tools are at his disposal. Which gives me, to be honest, a deep sense of unease as to his true intentions, coupled with the fact that so often when those who know him well capture a brief glimpse of the truth inside, they seem not comforted, warmed, heartened, curious, but shocked, horrified even, and that's of great concern. Malcador says that the Emperor was not the Emperor until he met him, but this does not mean to say the Emperor was not aware he needed to and would also meet Malcador. We see many further glimpses of the Emperor Malcador's relationship, example in the short The Board is Set, where the Emperor prepares Malcador for his most critical role for humanity. And by the way, that's the core aspect of that story. There's some other stuff in there, but people get carried away with it. The Emperor's continued deception has left a galaxy racked by war, tearing itself apart. The Empire of Humanity, the Imperium, is holding itself together, but with ultimately near to no forward direction. Was this the Emperor's grand vision, or is it merely a pause? Has he, through his lies and arrogance, doomed humanity itself to a slow death via attrition?
Yep, well, once again, it's exactly what I've been saying this whole time about the Emperor, and basically shattering the romantic vision of him. As much as I love it, it's just, that is a lot more true than anything. You cannot ignore the facts and all of that. Good night, dear Ivy. Sleep well. Thank you for being here. Wishing you a great day tomorrow. And yes, a blast. A blast we shall have. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Angron rightly observed, we fight to silence anyone that dares draw breath and whisper a different opinion from ours. We fight because the Emperor wants every world in his hands. For each time I wage war against worlds that threaten the Imperium's advance, there comes another time when I'm told to conquer peaceful worlds that wish only to be left alone. I am told to destroy whole civilizations and call it liberation. I am told to demand millions of men and women from these new worlds to make them take up arms in the Emperor's hordes, and I'm told to call this a tithe or recruitment because we are too scared of the truth. The truth Angron is speaking to, of course, is that the Emperor, like any tyrannical dictator, has enslaved humanity to his will, his unbreakable singular vision that must be executed and followed at all costs on pain of death. And this would then be continued for another 10,000 years under the banner of the all-powerful Imperium, the God Emperor of mankind.
Yeah, exactly. So if that is something that comes from Angron, you can be sure that's exactly the case, because Angron is not like the best person ever, and he's saying this about his father. So what does that tell ya? That the Emperor is that and more.
Again, was this the Emperor's grand vision? To emulate the despots, dictators and freakish cults of the barbaric wastelands of Earth in the aftermath of the Age of Strife? Or was it for all of humanity to exist in a stagnating, dying pool of despair? The Emperor all along has operated on the principle of going all in on his vision for the future. There was never going to be any half measure in his Imperium, his future for humanity. And that's not my speculation, it's very clear from the beginning when Ol P decided to turn away from the Emperor for this very reason, that the Emperor would allow no compromise, no adaptation, ever. This is later supported by accounts of other perpetuals. The Emperor demands absolute loyalty, absolute devotion and sacrifice, or suffer his unconstrained wrath. The Emperor will destroy and lay waste to entire civilizations across the galaxy that I've often argued, if only they were stronger, retained a little more from the dark age of technology, may well have been able to actually resist the Imperium. And what an interesting galaxy things would have turned out to be then. If of course they were also able to resist the Emperor, but that's entirely another matter. As things stand, there is far too much which remains out of reach to us. Most critical being to discover just what the Emperor's overall plan was, because for someone who set out with an agenda of forming a civilization, a culture based not on myth, religion or superstition, as somebody not wanting to be seen as a god, he surely went far out of his way to do just about everything possible to be seen as one, while telling everybody continually that he wasn't. And if that isn't the ABC of how to form a religion, I don't know what is. So I think it's safe to say the Emperor doth protest too much. I mean, he literally made a Primarch who looked like an angel. Things got so confusing that even one of his own Primarchs couldn't tell which way was up. As always, the Emperor appears as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face. Just a heads up, if you don't want to be seen as a god, don't walk around as a giant dressed in gold, performing miracles and laying waste to entire civilizations. Humans aren't the sharpest knives in the drawer, we tend to let our imaginations run away with us. Like I said from the beginning, the Emperor of Man is nothing if not single-minded, arrogant and unshakable in his vision. He decided upon this path long ago. We have scant few perpetuals to corroborate anything of the ancient times, but they seem to have no major stake in lying. So although their accounts are scant, we can probably trust them. The only question is if they even remember things accurately over 30 or 40,000 years. What we've been told is that upon the ancient Earth, the Emperor was not as powerful as he would become, although it was also told that he was always stronger than the others, than the other perpetuals, the other early psychers of humanity, if you will. And this is fairly important, because slightly more powerful is quite a step from erasing the memories of legions of Astartes, and physically being a guiding beacon for all humanity across the galaxy, and all of the other insane things the Emperor can achieve by the period of M30. Now, we might well consider, okay, this is a very long time, and just as we see other psychers emerging in human history over this time, perhaps the Emperor simply became more and more powerful. However, several things stick in my mind. Firstly, that doesn't seem to have happened with other perpetuals, and also Horus states that the Emperor travelled to Moloch potentially several millennia previous, and that's just his guess. It could have been even earlier. We know that he travelled there with perpetuals, and I also presume this to have occurred prior to the Age of Strife, which occurred in M25. Now, Malcador himself has stated in the early years of M31 that he is 6,718 years old, placing his birth, or however he came into being, around M24, the millennia just prior to the Age of Strife. Additionally, I've always had a difficult time discarding how Malcador explains so clearly in First Lord where the woman he is consoling on her deathbed presumes his extended age is due to his close association with the Emperor, that the Emperor's powers gifting Malcador life beyond that of a human, and Malcador laughs and says, no, you have it backwards. The Emperor was not the Emperor until he met me. So he's suggesting here that something significant occurred between the Emperor and Malcador early on in their companionship.
Yeah, whatever that is very interesting. So none other of the perpetuals got anything of the sort in terms of powers as the Emperor, because he's the Emperor. It's like saying I'm Batman. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. And Alex, hi to you, and thank you very much.
Now, who knows when that is, but it's very plausible that this could have occurred within, let's say, the first 1,000 years of Malcador's lifetime, well within the scope for the Emperor to then travel to Moloch. Because let's just go back over this. How did the Emperor know he needed to travel to Moloch again? Did he just know off the top of his head that this place was there? Did he sense it? How did he acquire that knowledge? Now, possibly he would have had access to records through the time he lived through, but it's also possible that somebody told him of what lay there in the depths, the ancient discoveries of human civilization.
Oh yeah, that is so freaking interesting. Mati, what is that? If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. Emperor, I'm not a god. What we see. A giant in golden light, in golden armor, doing godlike things. Yes, but it's it's exactly what I've been saying, Jesus. I just can't believe how Luetin said so many things that I said, just like 2 months ago maybe. It's just awesome that we both reached the same conclusions. Just great. Okay.
Post-Dark Age of technology, say somebody who belonged to an order whose entire purpose was to remember critical information. Malcador says, for the longest time, he was only the greatest of warlords of old Earth. They knew him by a different name. Malcador talks of the Aquila's symbolism and how its blindness is not always representative of a lack of sight. In this, I believe he is alluding to things that they do not wish to see, or more importantly, do not wish to acknowledge. He states the Emperor does not dwell upon the past. His attention's always focused on his vision for mankind's destiny. He doesn't want to talk about the untoward things that they maybe did in order to get to here. I believe in my current headspace that Malcador provided the Emperor with the knowledge of Moloch so that the Emperor and other perpetuals would travel there with the express purpose of gaining whatever it is he brought away, which I believe to be probably both knowledge and power. Malcador and the Emperor then began planning their grand scheme to guide humanity into a new age within the webway, as the Emperor has been pretty clear about, and thereby enable us to become a truly all-powerful psychic race and sever our connection to the warp, which the Eldar failed to do. Sometimes the Emperor sounds a little bit more like headed in a Necron direction, but regardless, the big point is what happens with the heresy and the Astartes, and this is really where things become difficult. In one respect, it's reasonable for us to perhaps assume, okay, perhaps instead of one almighty extermination event similar to the Thunder Warriors, the Astartes engage in a more staggered destruction. The Emperor would not have the forces to destroy the combined power of the Astartes, or I presume so anyway. So perhaps alternatively to a large slaughter, some would have had some use in the interim, like Magnus, Dawn, Guilliman, whereas the more unstable, unreliable Primarchs would be twisted into darkness, ultimately destroyed. Except this doesn't work, because Guilliman has had several attempts at killing Mortarion, Fulgrim, and has been readily slapped down to the ground every single time. In fact, one of the few things that saved him was a form of religious intervention on behalf of the Sororitas. So this concept of the Astartes just fighting to the death and basically extinguishing each other, sort of as Malcador states or alludes to, I feel like there is something in there, but the precise details are kind of unknowable. Also, something that never comes up with the Emperor's grand plans. What happens to all the Mechanicus? I have a feeling they're not going to be too thrilled at the concept of having to leave Mars, leave all their cogs, oils, incense and giant robot toys behind. So is the Emperor's plan to really have a huge civil war, and then after that have another civil war? It's hard to really put together in a reasonably logical way once you actually start to think about it. This is in fact perhaps why the Emperor's plan has never been fully revealed. Because the more you put the puzzle pieces together, you start to realise you're missing way too many pieces to make any kind of coherent picture. You've got maybe one corner that sort of looks like something, but the rest is just bits of possible things. Now, do I think that the remaining Astartes and Primarchs would have to eventually be destroyed? Yes, absolutely. It's clear repeatedly that no matter what he says at a surface level, the Emperor has got no care for his creations. They're just tools to complete a task and be discarded. He doesn't consider them human even, because later down the line, if humanity eventually became so psychically developed, what would then be the need for the throne and Magnus and the Primarchs and the Astartes? Also, of course, there would be no need for navigators, astropaths and so on. If we take Malcador at his word, which for the most part I feel you can, the heresy was planned to some degree, it was schemed to occur. But if that were true, it's also difficult to see how the Emperor's plan could have worked at all. Was his plan to usher most of humanity into the webway, then slam the door shut, put up some kind of psychic bubble around the throne room and gateway, just let everything outside annihilate itself, which it probably wouldn't? Again, to a degree, that kind of seems like the Necron's plans. Go to sleep, let everybody destroy themselves via entropy and awaken to a lovely clean galaxy? In truth, the Emperor of Man seems something of a nightmarish being, but only in the sense that he exists in my mind as the ultimate distillation of a species. When people see through to the core of the Emperor, I always imagine they're seeing something like humanity in its most raw, terrifying form. Or another possibility is, of course, that yes, the Emperor, if we take any number of wildly speculative origin stories, most of those lean toward the Emperor being something not entirely human by any measure of definition. Really, this starts to get into more philosophical terminology because we start to think about things like, okay, what makes us human? How do you define this? Is a Psyker still human? Is a Custodes and Astartes? What is it that's different between a human and a not? Why does that matter? Why does the Emperor care so much about the difference of what makes a human and what doesn't? Why does he care about that? Is it just purely our eternal survival? The more you pull at this thread, the more it starts to become difficult to place just what it is he's so invested in. And that in itself is pretty troubling. And this is perhaps why you have figures like Ol P, John Grammaticus, who have taken this position that the Emperor should be stopped and that humanity should be allowed to take its own course. Of course, with Ol P, that wasn't really his opinion for the longest time and worth discussing another time. But in my mind, the Emperor is more of a tragic figure, so consumed by his own belief, his own purity of vision, his own hubris mostly, that he's unable to see clearly at all that he's very likely doing far more harm than good.
Yeah, I agree with Luetin. And also, you can say that when you take a look at Warhammer, the way that it's written, like I said before, it's the opposite of a positive worldview of any esoteric literature, which is used to some capacity to create the fictional world of Warhammer 40k. We discussed that a lot before. So the way that is written, not only it's like the opposite, but it is, well, it is hell. I mean, it's the opposite, that it is hell, and it doesn't make any sense. This type of doing things and living and all that just doesn't make any sense. So I would say the Emperor is an example of someone that doesn't know how to actually not only rule, but live to be beneficial to others and himself. He is a destructive force that is so full of himself and he is so far in his own ass that he doesn't see how wrong he is and that he's actually bringing humanity to total ruin and degradation. So yeah, from that point of view, Luetin is also correct. Oh yeah, and I also think, sorry, I thought that I played that.
And if his
I also think that GW just didn't think that far. So whether it makes sense or not, to make it make sense is gonna be very, very difficult at this point. Because yeah, where does it all end? It just seems a bit ridiculous. Will we ever know what the Emperor's plans were or are in our lifetime? Will GW end the story? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking, that even GW doesn't know how this ends, I don't think.
Intentions are positive, pure, and he really believes he can achieve what seems impossible. A small tangent. In many ways, I see the Emperor not dissimilarly to Davros in Doctor Who Genesis of the Daleks. And I'm sorry to throw in such a wild tangent reference, but I really see a lot of similarity. And I'm not talking about Davros in the new shows, but just in this classic serial Genesis of the Daleks. Because Davros, like the Emperor, also seems to have this maniacal obsession to see his species survive. Not unlike the Emperor, he was looking only at the big picture. He saw the perpetuation of his race via the Daleks, also partly himself.
A weakness that will make you give me the knowledge to change the future. You are afflicted with a conscience.
And the Daleks were to be the ultimate genetic evolutionary form, kind of like what the Emperor is looking toward. So to Davros, this becomes the only important thing at all.
I allowed this charade to be played out for one reason only. To find those men who were truly loyal to me, and to discover those who would betray me. I will go on exterminate!
This is some kind of nightmare. Nightmares, damn it.
He will sacrifice everything, even all the souls of his civilization in the current time, to see his ultimate form be perpetuated into the future, because in his mind all of the things in the current time no longer mattered. He was looking at the much bigger picture. Another thought is that the Emperor understood the impossibility of his task and was trying to just walk a line. I've often thought perhaps the reason his goals were not clear is because he was just trying to play the odds, knowing the unpredictable nature of humanity, and that maybe he thought, well, if this doesn't work, I've sown enough seeds in the minds of all that maybe things will go in a different direction that still will help to protect humanity. Say, for example, turning the entire galaxy into a hyper-religious state that spends all their efforts worshipping the Emperor, so much so that it becomes an immense power in its own right. If we think about the Emperor's goals in the most basic terms, his plan was to unite humanity and lead it to a newly evolved state, secure from the most dire threats. Except, if that were true, then why in the hell did he wait until after the golden age of humanity, as I said before, to get involved and sort things out? By all accounts, humanity was actually smashing it in the golden age, but instead he opted for, no, I'm going to let everything turn to absolute ruin and then start from scratch. As I said, something seriously doesn't add up here, and as many have suggested before, for the Emperor, it might have been a plan to just, save a few functional STCs somewhere, just store them away in a big underground safe in a mountain range, just in case, just on the off chance they're needed. Let's play it safe. This, of course, though, is not the point. The Emperor...
Yeah, okay, note to self once again. Dear Clayton, if you like, you can write this as well, along with the custody note. So, the question is, because right now he's using Gilliman to get back to life and to somehow continue things, does that mean that if he comes back to full power and to life, he's just gonna obliterate the Primarchs? I mean, Gilliman. Oh, sorry guys, it is almost 1 a.m. So, yeah, does that mean that he's going to obliterate Gilliman and the Astartes and just start all over again? Like, what is the plan? Just use them as much as he can and then just, destroy them all? Like, interesting.
Is meant to be a flawed figure, just like the rest of humanity, and so when he asserts that he is just a man, just a human, not a god, I believe he's actually being honest in how he sees himself. For the humans who look upon him and see this godlike being of immense power, they're only able to see what he appears to be, not what he truly is. The vision he projects is what in part enables him to marshal such respect and awe among humanity, and it's only for those who see through this to what lies beneath do they see the true face, and as John Grammaticus would say, a bloodthirsty bastard. The Emperor's plan, to my mind, however you want to approach it, could never have worked, for the simple reason of humanity. The Emperor...
Yeah, well, he's not wise enough, I guess, to figure that out himself, so he just pushes and pushes. And what is that? It's ego. It's just ego. That is how he will not be able to see anything that otherwise would be obvious to, well, anyone else that is intelligent enough and actually has wisdom. But I don't think that he does not see himself as a god. I mean, he was aware of his limits at the beginning, that he got more powerful, and then he got really lost into his power. So even if he didn't, if he did not thought of himself as a god, now he does, and he just wants to become more of a god, and using humanity and their beliefs as the power source. So I'm not surprised if that is exactly what he's doing.
The Emperor had some early success, but even before they were setting out on the crusade, the Imperium was already failing. The hypocrisy was just far too clear to see before things even began. This is illustrated perfectly in Valdor: Birth of the Imperium. Kandawire wants to put Valdor on trial for the slaughter of the Thunder Warriors because, despite what the Emperor had promised, that humans themselves would play a strong, actual part in the new Imperium, she quickly discovers that this is not the case. Kandawire remembers stories from her father about Earth as it was. This is what she's built herself around. And so she knows firsthand that humanity was ruled differently in the past. But she begins to see that the Emperor is no different than any of the other warlords and autocrats. In the end, she is vanquished for no other reason than attempting to fulfill her role as the head of Terra's Arbites. Instead, she's told...
Which is exactly what I said about the Emperor, that he's just like another warlord. Like, what is the difference? His powers only, basically.
To ignore the outright massacre of the Thunder Warriors, and is exiled to live in a small desert camp home, spared execution by the grossly hypocritical Imperial Custodes who sanction her for attempting to carry out the job they assigned her in the first place. And the Imperium would only spiral downhill from here. But it was truly this undermining of the civilian government so early on that exposed and betrayed the truth of the Imperium, that it was purely to be the Emperor's autocracy. This may have been more palatable had he clearly laid out his plans to anybody at any time, but apparently no, this was too dangerous or unnecessary. The Emperor's plan failed not because of Horus or Erebus or any of the Primarchs, not because of humanity, not because of chaos. The Emperor failed because he placed himself at the center of everything, because he believed in his almighty hubris that only he could be the salvation of humanity, and he couldn't bear to share the burden, not even with his most close companions and allies, instead speaking forever in vague riddles and metaphors and stories and tales and all this other crap. His arrogance was his most human flaw, and ironically, the Eldar's flaw as well, both so highly advanced, both so certain of themselves that they were perhaps unable to even contemplate the possibility of failure, the possibility that perhaps it was they who were the main problem. In short, when you lay it all out, everything the Emperor did from start to finish was either one of the most deep, carefully laid, visionary plans conceived ever, so much so that because of such visionary levels of genius, even now we still cannot see how it was all meant to work. Or perhaps, far more likely, the Emperor had this vision of where he needed to get to, what he needed to achieve, and was thereafter, for the most part, winging it all the way, trying to paper over the cracks as they appeared and hoping somehow it was all going to work out. The final and far more disturbing plan is that this continues on as some kind of unseen master plan that involves him dragging humanity into the state of miserable decay as it has been for some 10,000 years, meanwhile the Emperor has not come close to completing his goals still, and that this remains just another piece in his grandiose galactic puzzle. Primarch Guilliman has not shared his insight with the Emperor for us. That would have been nice, beyond the fact of course that the Emperor was not how the Primarch remembered him and that this greatly disturbed him. I feel we're unlikely to glean a significant amount of new information from the ongoing heresy, but there are still some aspects to dive in on regarding the Emperor, past and future. Much like Moloch, regardless of how it turned out, the Emperor's grand plan, as far as we're able to understand, as presented, appears to have failed. The only question now is, was this part of a far longer, grander plan that perhaps the Emperor himself was not even able to fully understand the scale and scope of? Will he now, as a figure of powerful worship within the Imperium, empower humanity further? There are signs of this already within the Imperium, as Lord Guilliman is discovering himself. Important questions remain to unravel further, like what of the Cognitae, and perhaps who knows what even still of the Cabal perhaps? What of the Great Rift or Blackstone, of the Necrons' moves in the galaxy, and the Anari? What of the state of the Ecclesiarchy in the Imperium? Could the Emperor be reborn, as many factions of the Inquisition believe? Could he become more powerful than all of Chaos combined? Through the power of the Imperium's God-Emperor religion, permanently fueling and empowering the Emperor to fight an eternal war in the warp, to become, as so many have speculated, a positive god of light in the warp, to become that which he had always intended and enable humanity to be led into a new age of perhaps continued war, but also evolution and enlightenment. I think a short quote from Mortis best summarizes the Emperor in his entirety, where in the ancient past he's speaking with Ol P. The Emperor is arguing that in the interests of humanity in its far distant future, he should secure some dark, extremely powerful knowledge. The Emperor says, "Take this knowledge and the fate changes. Leave it and it unravels. It is a simple choice." "There are no simple choices," said Ol. "But there are," said the Emperor. "It's just the consequences that are complicated."
Okay, and something that I like to add here is, how can the Emperor become a god of light? Like, that's absolutely impossible. His ways, his path is all bloody. It is, yeah, it is all blood and gore, his path. So how can he become anything of the light? I mean, he can become another chaos god that opposes them, but for the reasons that he just wants to rule himself, not that he wants to be a force of goodness or anything like that. So yeah. Book recommendations. So I want to hear the book recommendations because they're pretty important. I would like to read those if I can. I don't know if this music is copyrighted, I'm gonna lower it a bit. He likes to do these things. I'm gonna jump to the end. Okay, here are the books. Okay, let's see the books. And final words, guys, final words.
So now let's talk about my next selection for you on Audible. I decided that it would be good to give everybody time to work through a trilogy that I completed relatively recently, and overall the series I'm talking about is the updated Dark Imperium, Plague War and Godblight series. Now,
okay, so I am currently on the Dark Imperium. I have to get to Plague War after that, and I did also, finished and reviewed Godblight. So Dark Imperium kind of sucks. I mean, it starts great with the resurrection of Gilliman, then it's like super boring to the point where I just zone out, and I was like, what is happening there? What? Like literally, it's bad, and then it gets a bit more interesting when Gilliman is talking to that robot avatar, I think, of damn it, I forgot his name. What is Alias Cole? No, that's not his name. Well, the Adeptus Mechanicus main genius guy that made the Primaris. Belisarius Cole? I'm very bad with names, but the point is that conversation was great, and I'm at that point of the book, so yeah. Continuing.
there's a whole variety of twists and turns across these 3 audiobooks, and the story delves into a plethora of topics. There's many different perspectives presented, and a huge amount of discussion to be had. Of course, the Heresy series is one that people always want to gravitate to, but because I really enjoyed this trilogy overall, I think it's a very valuable series also in understanding where things stand right now for humanity and the Imperium in M41.
That's true, that's true.
It would be best to complete this trilogy through the remaining months of this year, and then I'll make an overview of the entire series later along the line, but I'll still be recommending other additional options to listen to in upcoming months. I know so many of you have contributed thoughts to...
Did I? Belisarius Cole? I'm really hoping I'm not mistaking that. It seems that if warp travel is going to go on, the warp needs to be calmed and chaos pushed back, so the Emperor brings calm to the warp. Well, if he can obliterate them.
To me about
Thanks,
why
Matty.
you enjoy Audible as a service before now, and it's one that I continue to enjoy. Remember, if you're new to all of this, you can get involved today by starting your 30-day Audible trial with Premium Plus. This gets
yeah, I mean, Audible is great. It's just expensive.
a free audiobook as well as full access to thousands of originals, audiobooks, and podcasts. You'll also get access to the Plus catalogue, all are included with your membership, so you can download and stream all you want, no credits needed. Visit audible.com/Luetin, or for those in the US, text Luetin,
next book,
500. And as always, very big thanks to all of you for supporting
if he recommended
me here
anything else, though, I
so
don't remember. Let's see.
I'll see you in the next one.
Oh, that was it. Okay, so thanks to dear Clayton for getting me the books as well, finding them. It's awesome. Thank you, dear Clayton. So yeah, I was supposed to get done with the first book like 2 weeks ago, but it's just painful, like I've said, and now I finally got to something good, so I'm gonna continue it, and hopefully it's more interesting as I go on. And I know what is the second book about, so I'm interested to get to that. Yeah, Cole is a very, 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 very smart guy, and he's one of the longest living, well, humans. Although can you really call him human? He's basically a machine to this point, but a genius one. So yeah, there's a lot of things there in that conversation with Gilliman. With his avatar, not Belisarius Cole directly, but still, that avatar machine was programmed to say everything that Gilliman was asking him, or at least most of it. That's another topic, guys. So, conclusion, because I really have to go to bed. It is 1 a.m. and 6 minutes, and tomorrow we have the Spider-Man trailer, which I don't know what time that is going to be Bulgarian time. It is something like 2 a.m., but it's probably not my time. It's probably 2 a.m. I mean like in an hour, or it's going to be like in still the little hours of my time, maybe 5 or 6 in the morning, I'm not sure. But when I get up, whenever that is, because I'm going to bed now, I'm going to prepare and do a day reaction as fast as I can. So yeah, thank you, dear Clayton, once again. Thanks, Matty, Alex, for being here, and dear Clayton went to bed. Thank you to everybody that's watching, that are watching, even if you're not commenting. But guys, if you like to support, you can check the links down below to my OnlyFans. Everything that I do there is to educate and help you, and you can become a member of the channel. You can just like as well, which is great, and comment, because that also helps. And hope that I can see you tomorrow, guys. In conclusion, like I said, I like what Luetin is saying. I agree 99.9% about everything. It's just fun how people argued with me that have romanticized vision of the Emperor just like 2 months ago, and now Luetin is saying the same things that I did. It's just great confirmation for me. I reach my conclusions to psychology, basically, analysis, and he is also the same way. He is taking a lot of different types of factors. At the beginning of his video, he explained how he did come to all these conclusions, and it's extremely awesome to listen to, and I'm happy that I also did in my own way. So yes, but yeah, I really don't think that GW has figured all of these things out. We'll see, because the last book, Godblight, reached a very, very interesting point, and from here on out, Gilliman has to do something that is directed by the Emperor. So I hope that we can somehow see the light at the end of the tunnel, basically. See the Emperor in some capacity, see where this whole thing is going, and just not like hold it forever. So yeah, hopefully in our lifetime we will get if the Emperor's gonna come back and what he's actually going to do, what does he want to do, and all of those things. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Love ya. Until next time, me Geri reviews, or the Empress of Mankind. That it's really a light one, not like the Emperor. Jesus. Okay, guys. Night night.